China's aircraft carrier has recently attracted a lot of attention due to a series of incidents. The most sensational are these images. China's third aircraft carrier, the Fujian carrier, is about to undergo sea trials. In May, netizens discovered from Google Earth satellite photos that the deck of the aircraft carrier was suspected to be cracked, raising questions about whether the Chinese aircraft carrier was a tofu dreg project. The Fujian ship was moored at a pier in Shanghai at the time. The photo has triggered heated discussion. Some media speculated that the suspected crack was actually a blocking cable to assist aircraft landing. However, the blocking cable is usually placed in front of the carrier, rather than the end as seen in the photos. So this theory was quickly debunked. It was also reported that the crack was the shadow of a tower on the deck, while some alleged that the real cause of the crack was due to severe distortion in the images taken or transmitted by US satellites. A former captain of a Taiwan Navy's missile patrol ship said in an interview with the Voice of America that modern ships are built in sections. That is, they are built one by one and then assembled in the dock. If the suspected crack of the Fujian carrier is due to welding, it wouldn't be like this. The crack would be straight because the fracture would be in one section. It wouldn't look irregular. This former captain analyzed that if the deck were built with steel plates only, it would be very slippery when the waves splashed in or because of dew. A layer of sanding paint was usually used on the steel plates to increase the friction when the crew walked on it or the aircraft landed on the ship. This was not only the case for the Liaoning carrier but also for the Shandong and Fujian carriers. It was even so for the USS Reagan. Since the Fujian vessel is still undergoing various equipment tests, each seawater line or freshwater line needs to be tested with actual water to confirm if the design goal is achieved. Therefore, for example, the nozzles on the deck will be tested for water spraying. So, when the deck is tested for water spraying, the water will flow in the direction of the sanding paint in pattern. The Taiwanese captain pointed out from his own experience of staying on board the ship for many years that every morning the junior officers and men had to clean the deck to remove the water and oil stains to avoid any accident. He said, "Why this crack is seen here and there? If we use this water movement on the deck to explain it, it makes more sense." Experts from the Center for Strategic and International Studies, CSIS, a U.S. think tank, also published an article on June 13, 2023, denying the rumors, saying that the dark traces on the Fujian were just liquid. CSIS accused the news of being a flood of false information and analyzed commercial satellite photos taken on May 15th. They have shown no visible cracks on the Fujian carrier or any other signs that might pose a problem for the PLA. There was no evidence that the ship's crew was engaged in any repair work to fill the cracks. CSIS also analyzed satellite images from September 8, 2022 and April 23, 2023, and found that the liquid seemed to flow out from the port side and then to the starboard side. Since the Fujian carrier was moored at the pier, the starboard side was sometimes slightly tilted due to tidal oscillations. So, what the captain said makes sense. Past images also show that the dark marks appeared in different places at different times, further proving that they weren't cracks. After the naming ceremony of the Fujian carrier on June 17, 2022, it started the subsequent tests and trials. Chinese media reported and predicted that China would definitely build new aircraft carriers in the future, in addition to the present 3 carriers of Liaoning, Shandong, and Fujian. On May 10, 2023, during the 10th anniversary of the formation of the Chinese Navy's Fleet Air Arm, China's national TV station showed images of 2 types of carrier aircraft, presumably the new generation of stealth fighter jets, the J-35, and an upgraded version of the J-15, both of which are expected to be deployed on the Fujian ship. The crack has been proven false. So exactly how powerful are the CCP's aircraft carriers? In May 2023, the Shandong carrier leaked an inside scoop that its capacity was far from adequate as it crossed the Taiwan Strait. The leak came with a lot of drama. On May 30th, the U.S. Indo-Pacific Command released a video showing a Chinese J-16 fighter jet intercepting a U.S. RC-135 reconnaissance aircraft over the South China Sea on May 26th. The U.S. military accused the Chinese jet of unprofessional, aggressive maneuvers. On May 31st, China's Southern Theater responded with this statement. On May 26, during the routine training of the Chinese Navy's 17-ship formation in the South China Sea, an RC-135 reconnaissance plane of the U.S. military deliberately broke into our training area to carry out reconnaissance interference. The Southern Theater organizes air forces to track and monitor the whole process. The hull number of the Shandong carrier is 17. That is to say, in response to the American accusation, the CCP voluntarily revealed that the U.S. military reconnaissance plane was in the airspace above the Shandong carrier at the time. On May 26, the Shandong carrier was supposed to be passing through the South China Sea to the Taiwan Strait and cross the Taiwan Strait from south to north at noon on May 27th. On May 27th, notification from Taiwan's military confirmed this. According to the report from Taiwan, the aircraft carrier Shandong passed through the Taiwan Strait under the escort of 2 warships, heading west and north along the center line of the Taiwan Strait. The CCP's self-disclosure of such information serves as an attempt to justify the J-16's interception of the U.S. reconnaissance plane. It claimed that the U.S. reconnaissance plane broke into the training area of the Shandong carrier. But this little lie turns out to have revealed a big secret of the CCP Navy. The Chinese military said that the Shandong carrier was training in the South China Sea, but didn't say it was a drill. It didn't delineate the drill area in advance, nor did it announce that other ships or aircraft were prohibited from entering. As for training, the South China Sea is a public space, which means the Chinese Navy can train and other countries' civilian or military vessels and aircraft can also pass through or train. Therefore, the so-called intrusion into our training area seems strange. If the Shandong carrier was training after spotting the U.S. reconnaissance aircraft, the J-15s on the carrier should have immediately taken off to alert, confront, or even drive off, as the CCP often says. However, the J-15s were not seen. Instead, the Chinese Southern Theater dispatched J-16s to the scene. The CCP didn't give out details, but it's likely that the Shandong carrier had no J-15s on board and can only watch helplessly as the American aircraft took pictures and gathered information. This is very embarrassing for an aircraft carrier. One of the biggest possibilities is that the U.S. reconnaissance aircraft circled back and forth and would not leave. The Chinese military had no choice but to order the Southern Theater Air Force to step in. The CCP might have felt humiliated and therefore indulged the aggressive behavior of the J-16 pilots. The pilots had naturally enjoyed performing, claiming credit when they encountered the non-threatening U.S. reconnaissance aircraft. But it has resulted in another dangerous standoff between the Chinese and U.S. forces. Now the question arises, since the Shandong carrier wasn't in the South China Sea for military training nor for drills, what was it there for? On May 27th, Taiwan's military reported that the Shandong carrier, escorted by 2 warships, passed through the Taiwan Strait and headed north along the central line of the Taiwan Strait to the west. So what was it doing in the Taiwan Strait? We think it should be on its way to the shipyard in the northern Chinese port of Dalian for maintenance and repairs. In December 2019, the Chinese military announced the delivery of the Shandong aircraft carrier in Sanya, Hainan province. Party leader Xi Jinping attended the ceremony. After that, the Shandong carrier quickly returned to the Dalian shipyard via the Taiwan Strait. It wasn't actually completed, but the delivery was announced a year earlier for political purposes. It wasn't until December 2020 that the Shandong carrier went to Hainan again, officially being delivered. On March 18, 2022, the Shandong carrier crossed the Taiwan Strait again and returned to the Dalian shipyard for maintenance and repairs. On April 5, 2023, the Shandong carrier made its first voyage training in the Philippine waters for about half a month, after which it returned to Hainan base. On May 27, the Shandong carrier crossed the Taiwan Strait to the north and was supposed to return for maintenance and repairs again. As reported by the Taiwan military briefing on May 27th, from 0600 on May 27th to 0600 on May 28th, 8 Chinese fighter aircraft were detected, none of which were J-15s. Several days passed. Neither Japan nor Taiwan announced any update about the Shandong carrier. That is to say, the Shandong carrier didn't go around Taiwan for training, but rather headed to the shipyard in the north. When the Shandong carrier returns to the shipyard for repairs, it must either go north through the Taiwan Strait or go around the eastern part of Taiwan. The chances of it going along the east of Taiwan is practically zero. It means it has to cross the Bashi Channel into the Philippine waters, then go north through the Miyako Strait into the East China Sea before it reaches the shipyard in Dalian. The route is long and away from the coastline of China. As such, it needs to be escorted by a complete fleet. It's estimated that a supply ship will accompany it, and carrier-based fighter jets will also be indispensable. Otherwise, when an empty carrier sails in the Philippine waters and encounters American and Japanese fighter jets or battleships, it would just be embarrassing. In addition, if the Shandong carrier sails around Taiwan, all 5,000 crew members would have to come along, or the carrier wouldn't be able to operate at full capacity. The hassle actually goes beyond the round trip of 5,000 crew members, including their meals and living quarters. It also concerns the fighter jets. If they were brought along, the J-15 and their pilots who belong to the Southern Theater would have to fly back to the Southern Theater once they arrived in Dalian. They may have to land and refuel at least once or twice in the Eastern or Central Theater midway. When the carrier maintenance is finished, these J-15s would have to fly back to Dalian again. The escort fleet would also have to sail back and forth at sea. It'll be most convenient for the Shandong carrier to cut through the Taiwan Strait, which can be operated much easier without taking fighter jets on board and with only a small crew to drive the ship. Sailing along the coastline also means there is no need for supply ships and more warships to escort the carrier. Under the CCP regime, troops aren't allowed to move between different theaters. They are prohibited to be deployed in other places freely unless orders are issued by the CCP Military Commission or by Xi Jinping. Otherwise, it runs the risk of being suspected of mutiny. Thus, a Chinese aircraft carrier returning to the shipyard would have to take a tortuous detour via eastern Taiwan. This is different from the US military, where any unit or equipment that enters the corresponding theater of operations is under the command of the respective theater. That is to say, the Shandong carrier has only been on one voyage that lasted about half a month for training, and the rest of the time it occasionally frequented offshore but still had to return to the shipyard for maintenance and repairs. The little time it had that could be used for operational readiness is far too short. The Liaoning carrier is under repair at the shipyard, the Shandong carrier is back for repairs, and the Fujian carrier hasn't yet been tested at sea. The Chinese Navy should have no aircraft carriers available right now. It'll be impossible to fight on one front, not to mention the four fronts. For example, the Chinese national television station reported that in early April the Shandong carrier participated in a war patrol and drill around Taiwan Island. And on April 21st, the Liaoning carrier also started a multidiscipline training of air defense and anti-submarine in the western Pacific Ocean. Therefore, the Chinese public opinion has been hyping up the so-called first time that two aircraft carriers drilled together in the West Pacific, claiming great significance. However, on the same day, April 21st, an interview video released by China's foreign propaganda network CGTN said that the Liaoning carrier was undergoing a major equipment upgrade, which means the Liaoning carrier was at the shipyard at the time. The most ridiculous matter is that at the same time, a Hong Kong media published an article that said that it would take 48 hours for Chinese carriers to kick in. The headline of the article reads, "It took 48 hours to boil water, but the war is over and it hasn't arrived at the battlefield yet." The article says that the Chinese steam turbines use heavy oil to heat 60 tons of water into steam, so it takes 48 hours to start up the 4 TB-12 boilers before they reach full power. It's pointed out in the article that the USS Nimitz aircraft carrier has 2 A4W nuclear reactors on board, and the startup time is about 2 hours to bring the Nimitz to full power. The author of the article goes by the alias of Military Fan Rally. While some believe that he is a military fan, others believe he may be a military officer who is familiar with the operation of the Chinese Navy and knows the specific equipment parameters of the Chinese fleet well. However, we can't confirm the credibility of this information yet. The Chinese and US military aircraft suddenly confronted each other again this time. A statement from the CCP Southern Theater of Operations said, The troops in the theater are on high alert at all times, resolutely defending national sovereignty and security and peace and stability in the South China Sea region. On May 31st, China's official media, Global Times, also stated that the U.S. reconnaissance plane is only about 50 kilometers from our coastline, and that it's completely necessary to drive away the U.S. military plane. However, when the U.S. reconnaissance aircraft arrived over the Shandong carrier, the Southern Theater didn't disclose the location of the confrontation and only stated that it organized air forces to follow and monitor the whole process. It dared not to claim that it quickly intercepted or drove away the American aircraft. On June 1st, U.S. Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin said in Tokyo that it was unfortunate that the Chinese defense minister refused to meet with him on the sidelines of the annual Shangri-La Dialogue Asian Security Summit. He added, "As we take a look at some of the things that China is doing, and in the international airspace in the region and international waters, the provocative intercepts of our aircraft and also our allies' aircraft, that's very concerning. And we would hope that they would alter their actions, but since they haven't yet, I'm concerned about, at some point, having an incident that could very, very quickly spiral out of control."
How y'all doing today? Sadly, Ed, these are part and parcel of an increasing level of aggressiveness by the PLA, the PRC's military, particularly in the area of the Taiwan Strait and in the South China Sea. The air intercept was over the South China Sea, and the maritime intercept that you talk about was in the Straits. And sadly, this is just part, again, of a growing aggressiveness by the PRC that we're dealing with, and we're prepared to address it. You heard Secretary Austin speak to that out at the Shangri-La Dialogue just this past weekend, and we're going to continue to keep the lines open with the Chinese to make it clear how unacceptable those particular intercepts are.
Our analysis should have explained why there was a high-profile warning from the U.S. and a low-profile response from the Chinese side. If China and the U.S. were to scuffle in the South China Sea, it would be quite detrimental to the CCP. The CCP should have tried hard to avoid a war in the South China Sea before there was one in the Taiwan Strait. This time, the U.S. military reconnaissance aircraft came close to scout and monitor the Chinese army. But during wartime, it wouldn't easily approach the coastline of China. The CCP's J-16s were dispatched to intercept the U.S. reconnaissance aircraft, but in the case of war, the real opponents they would face are likely to be the U.S. F-22s or F-35s. Because once the war started, the Taiwan Strait would be the most dangerous area, and any warships may be sunk by enemies' shore-based anti-ship missiles. When a war broke out, the CCP aircraft carriers and large warships wouldn't dare to cross the Taiwan Strait so easily. The Shandong carrier belongs to the Southern Theater and is based in the South China Sea. The Navy bases in the Eastern Theater are mainly located in Zhoushan, Zhejiang, and Shanghai, again out of range of Taiwan's shore-based anti-ship missiles. On May 21st, Taiwan's Ministry of National Defense reported that the carrier fleet of the Shandong carrier continued to head south, crossing the Taiwan Strait, or the Miyako Strait, and returned to its base in the South China Sea. We believe it could have finished its maintenance and was heading home. Of course, the Chinese military experts won't tell the public this. The Global Times quoted a Chinese military expert as saying, "The Shandong carrier crossing the Taiwan Strait has become a norm. It's a strategic deterrent serving as a warning to forces that support Taiwan independence and any foreign forces."